So I think Slit came about really from wanting to do art outside of uni, because I hadn't done it since GCSEs, and I'd done it for my masters after doing English Lit, and they didn't teach me how to do any art then because they had assumed you'd already done it. It was about creating your practice, and I'd kind of been making it in my own time for years, and I was suddenly like, well, I don't have any of the technical skills or any of the connections. How can I make this into a thing? And so I thought, I'll get some people in a similar position to do it with me and try and find some funding for this. And I came up with Slit as a kind of just a name for whatever this project was going to be at the time, and then spent a long time trying to ask people if they wanted to do it with me. I think once I'd found a couple of mates who I knew wanted to take their practice somewhere, even if it was music or writing or visual art, we kind of got ourselves together a bit, and I'd organised to have meetings with Bruce about basement arts, and at the same time Hype Up Book Club, to kind of have these shows so as something to work towards in this kind of structured project. And then we thought, okay, how can we make this cohesive? Is it going to be collaborative? We didn't know, we hadn't worked together on anything really. We'd occasionally jam together when we lived together over lockdown. And so we went to the pub basically, and we're just thinking, what connects our work? It's all kind of thinking about our relationships to other people. It's kind of about just our like daily lives really. And there's a lot of kind of mutual inspirations and stuff like that. And I think we settled upon basically our interpersonal relationships with other people, and the idea of control relating to that in terms of your background, your family, healthy and unhealthy ways that you try and create or regain or maintain control with things around you. And we were like, okay, from here, we're going to try and make everything new for this exhibition, and in some way it'll be linked to this theme. So at this point it was me, Georgie, Johnny and Clark. And it was us three were Slit basically, and we went to the pub again and started spitballing names for the exhibition. We wanted it to be kind of not something too sterile, but not something too cringy or artsy either, to kind of have some sort of grounding in our lives, something that we would say, something that people wouldn't have to look up the word and think, what does this mean? Try not to alienate people who haven't had that arts education. And we thought of a lot. Some were pretty good, some were a lot less good. Old Rotations was probably the closest alternative to Have You Left Yet? And I think as we were finding a name, apart from Garlic Panic, we thought more and more about what we wanted to portray with our art and who we wanted to involve. And we wanted it to not be kind of super like bright and grabbing your attention, but something that would kind of draw you in a bit more at people's own pace. And so we eventually settled on Have You Left Yet?, which we thought just had the kind of like mundanity, but also I guess that's something else that we were looking for. And with that we had our first exhibition booked, and this was the big kind of push for creating stuff, because we knew that this was going to be the testing ground for Basement Arts. This was kind of basically one evening and the following morning to kind of try out this stuff, get people to come because it was a lot closer to where we all lived, and kind of see what worked and have this deadline for creating work we hadn't really done before, and knowing that the best parts of this we would use for Basement Arts, where it would be a more, at least we thought, kind of artsy or art educated crowd. And this started kind of us seeing what our different processes were. I've included 2 of my own photos as a kind of, I guess, best way of kind of encapsulating everything that I was trying to create. I included some sketches in the thing, and I guess I really like the kind of installation element of exhibitions where it's not specifically sculptural or fully installation, but it's kind of more than the curation and kind of finding that in between space. Whereas kind of the photos were much more condensed way of what I was trying to express, like my intentions. So I'd always been pretty awkward in front of cameras. I hate them to this day, but this is a self-portrait I took where something about me taking it, I feel a lot less stressed. So you can see from where I didn't clean the negatives that this was on film with time at a flash. Made the prints ourselves, so all of the prints in the exhibition we did ourselves, apart from 2 where we had a big disaster in the darkroom with the chemicals and we had to get some digitally made just before the exhibition with not very much time. But this is probably, I guess, one of the reasons I included it was I could kind of capture myself in a way of me feeling more relaxed and less strained, and so could then concentrate more on the image itself and had full control of it in every sense of kind of the subject, the process, everything like that. And then this second photo was a triple exposure of Johnny, so a portrait of kind of interpersonal relationships within Slit itself, and kind of that different like dynamic of people that you work with versus people you have like friendships with, people you know outside basically of those structures of having to do stuff. And this again was one that didn't come out as planned originally, and so this was my digital print because the contrast just completely didn't come out. But I guess this process made us realise we can't do stuff that close to the exhibition day, otherwise if something happens then you have to take some emergency precautions. And I think us not doing exhibitions before and kind of, I guess, treating it in a similar way to we might have done uni work made us be, okay, we're involving a lot of other people, we need to have this a lot more put together, there's a lot more kind of moving pieces, and it was definitely a big kind of organisational, like, shit, okay, we need to get ourselves together a lot further in advance than we had thought. So this image and the following one are 2 of Johnny's images, which are double exposures as well. One is of me and one is of Harrison, and it's us against landscape, and it's bringing these techniques of double exposures to kind of bring together these things about chance versus incredibly like meticulous workings out of where people are in their photo versus the kind of complete luck of it sometimes, and the relationships of these people and what they like and what they enjoy. And I think this made all of the work really cohesive, as it was kind of bringing in like friends external to the group who we all knew, And I won't talk loads about Johnny's work for him, but at this point, kind of Slit had expanded to include Dan and Julia's work, and it was quite a sort of scrabbled thinking. We'd originally planned for the group to be much bigger, and we found people who want to take part and we like their work, and how can we kind of do this within a time frame. So we had to do some very kind of cutthroat crits with each other about basically saying this can go in, we don't want this in, without as much time for kind of the more generative critical feedback side of things. And I think that made us really look at our own practices and think, okay, when it comes down to it, it's either going to be selected or it's not, and kind of really work on that. And especially in terms of the curation with this small space but with more of us, that became a really interesting challenge, especially when we were installing. And then after that, because our original plan had been very much focused around multimedia and kind of having this music and art together to kind of get people to engage in each side of these things, we had the opening which had more poetry readings, and then begin to focus on the close, which is more about the kind of gig aspect that we knew how to do a bit better. And it just became this kind of ongoing project of using lots of different skills that we had and communicating about our practice and even the documentation of the practice to basically get to the point of where we are now, really, which is kind of looking at future plans for it and taking the skills that we've learned with different levels of experience at making art or kind of putting on events in general, and taking this further into doing solo shows or more group work.